The day is finally here, and history will be made. Taking it to the next level, live from Denver, Colorado. Cryptos Media proudly presents FE2018 USA, the second annual Flat Earth International Conference in America. Iru Landucci.
So it's like being in the next year, the NASA employers, the NASA astronaut, they must be maybe do the same thing. Start running after the country. So, well, I'm gonna try to start my presentation after this because it's a little difficult. Okay. Well, like Rick said, I have a bunch of slides to show. Maybe I didn't finish. I never finish my presentations. I leave open to see you again in the future, and it's like an infinite presentations every time I made something. So I'm gonna try to get to the end this time, but I know that I'm never gonna do it. So we're gonna start for the people that doesn't know me. I came from Argentina. This is my second time in the United States, so thank you guys for having me here. And this time, my presentation is going to be about, some technical stuff, but also more historical facts and symbolics and occultist things. Because for me, understanding the process of the flat Earth is not just, solving math or going to the technical stuff. It's more important understand when it started, who started, and why it started. And a lot of people that reject this topic is because they don't do their own research in the history. Because immediately you're going to find it who is support this, and it's the same elite in power that rule the world today. So it's not difficult to understand who is behind the scenes. So I'm gonna make this kind of mixed situations, and that is for David. Start drinking, man. And I'm prepared because I'm gonna say it a few times. And like I tell you before, I come from Argentina. I have 37 years old. My job is technical director on visual effects. So I come into the flat Earth and the moon landing hoax because my profession allowed me to understand what is going on with that videos. In fact, I do that kind of visual effects. And I have been 13 years from now researching about the New World Order and trying to understand what is happening in the world. As researcher from 4 years, and I have my own radio shows in Argentina from 4 years from now. And I also study and really recommend the shamanic medicine. That is really important to understand what happened when you have some, kind of thoughts and feelings and how you affect that directly to the body. And it's really important to, to understand why we are here, but, also what affect us in terms of our feelings. So I'm going to start it. I don't want to lose more time. The first things, I'm going to go a little quickly with this, but the first of all is we all been teaching in school about the shape of the Earth. The only place where you go to get that education is in educational institutions, and There is only one, at least for the occidental part of the world, who put all together and give it doesn't matter if it's in United States and Argentina, in every occidental part of the world, it's only one institution that give the educational program to the teachers and the children, and that is the UNESCO. And how you can read here is not only a cultural education, it's also a scientific education. Because this is go beyond elementary school or high school, this is go to universities and also, masterings. So that is why maybe it's not so hard to give one way to the world, in terms of education. So the founders of this institution, or the founder, not the founder, but the first director, and I believe also he participated in the foundation, was Julian Huxley from the Huxley family, which is a guy that he was an eugenicist, and of course he supports the work of Darwin, Charles Darwin. But he also has, a brother at that time, and the brother was the guy who write, A Happy World, The Doors of Perceptions, the script of the Alice in Wonderland, and he was an occultist, an occultist guy with a lot of mysticism, like you can read directly from Wikipedia. So you can imagine the family, in a normal dinner, changing ideas. So what are you gonna teach us in the school and the way? So you can start seeing, the roots of the UNESCO. And regarding to the shape of the Earth, this was presented by Robert Bassano, who is a really great guy researching in flat Earth. And this is, and in my country, for example, we have the same thing. But here you can see, periodically they made this kind of statistics, pick up group of children, in this case from Greece and from United States, and start asking questions about, for them, how is the shape of the Earth, what happened with the day and night cycles, if this really something like attract the things to the center of the sphere. And of course the natural response of the child is like you can read here. They don't agree with that. The common sense and the natural feeling of a child is like the Earth is flat, the day and night cycle is because the moon and the sun moving around the Earth. There is no center that pulling all the things to that center. It's just common sense, nothing like that, nothing more than that. So when you read, for example, both the Greeks and the American children conceptualize that the Earth is as flat and stationary, and it was located in the middle of the solar system. That is the first perception. So they create these institutional programs to change that. Of course, the best, when you are a child, you cannot even discuss or understand what is going on. So they brainwash very quickly. But when you go to the university, they do the same thing. For example, this is a paper from my university in psychology, and immediately you can see the tendency. They teach you the heliocentric theory, the evolution of the species, and the discovery of the unconsciousness. So it's in every step of the life, the brainwash continue, because they need to create this kind of propaganda behavior when, repeat and repeat and repeat. Doesn't matter the age, doesn't matter the culture, the country. The idea must be there that the Earth is a sphere rotating around the sun, because that is the only way they can control the world. So when you start looking into the real professions to study, there is only one in that list that you cannot study. And of course, that is the astronaut profession. You just, for be a pope, for be a 33 Freemason degree, or for being an astronaut, it's just only by selecting with a finger. It doesn't matter what your skill are. It's just, is that how it's work, It's some place of privilege. And we, as a people, we don't have any chance to select. We don't vote for the Pope, we don't vote for an astronaut, we don't vote for no one, even for the director of the ONU, of the UNESCO. So they create this illusion that we live in a free world, where we have the opportunities to select things, but we don't. We just select puppets like politicians and nothing more than that. So when you go to, I'm going to make it this a little faster because I want to get to the point of my presentation, but for me, this is important to understand. When you're trying to understand who was the scholars who have the information really in the past, you want to realize that the first guys that have access to real information, to real education, was only the religious people, because the rest of the people, they don't even know how to read or write. They don't have access to book. In the past, you are not going to a library and buy a book or that kind of things. The people just work for the king or for the authorities at that time. So the information always was, kept by these religious people. Then they start to, share a tiny bit with the first, if you want to call, agents for them, which was, creating this kind of hierarchies when you start seeing the alchemist, the Kabbalah, and that kind of hierarchies. The religious people instruct and give some knowledge to this guy, so this guy keep dividing the information, and present to the rest of the world. But until 1950, 1930, at least in my country, the majority of the people, they don't have even access to the school. You always need to pay to have access to education. But that education, it doesn't matter how much you pay. It comes from the same sources, and it have been, divided and putting compartment, Richard? That compartment, and just for us, never reach the top of the real information. So remember that, for example, in terms of religious information, the Vatican, they never opened the library. We're still waiting to the most, nice religion out there sharing the real information with the people. So when you start looking into who is behind the scenes, at least at the first side, you're going to find always a Jesuit. Always. There is no, you can escape of these guys. So, for example, at the time of Leonardo da Vinci, it was this Jesuit called Athanasius Kirchner, who was the first one in proposed, of course, he was, you can read it directly from Wikipedia, he was a symbologist, secrecy, magic, Kabbalah, alchemy, and occultism. The mystery of the human knowledge forbidden for the mortals and transmitted from remote antiquity from the Egyptian. That is why we see all the place, pyramids, obelisk, and that kind of symbology that reminds Egyptian culture. But was, put there not by the Egyptians, but for the church. In this case, for this order. And For example, this guy was also one of the first that create what we know as today as movie projectors, but at that time was called the magic lantern, and you can see here on the bottom. Of course, the picture that they're gonna show us is like a demon because they base their knowledge based on fear because it's more easy to control us by fear, by putting ideas that doesn't have any sense but produce fear in your mind so they can control you. But when we see that, kind of really close relation between Hollywood and NASA and Hollywood being that the holy good, created, but all this organization is because they actually was the first guys to create a movie projector. So that is how deep the things goes. And this guy also, for example, he present one of the first model that the Earth was in a sphere and has a nucleus, burning with fire. And this is the depiction of, this is the modern concept and this is the old concept. But the first one was presented by this kind of order. It's not by a scientist. They are the scientists at that time. So don't forget that the Vatican has the Mogbig library. And after a couple of centuries, all that information was put together and the Jesuits also create the Freemasonry. It's simply as that. They create this kind of, they subdivide the things to control more easy. And to the 70s and 18th centuries, where the Freemasonry really start to get important into the society, the first one, the father of the Freemasonry, the modern Freemasonry, was this guy called Elias Ashmole. He was considered the father of the Freemason, and he also worked with astrologers, with alchemists, with mathematicians. He found the Royal Society of London, the Philosophical Society of Oxford. So you can start see this concept, but the real knowledge of this guy was Egyptian and Hermetic, studies. So we back again to the Babylon, to Egyptian culture. And after this guy died, he write a lot of books, trying to talking about the solar system or the Earth system. Of course, they kept, the real information for the highest ranks in these societies, and for the rest of the fellowships, they just give, not real information. After he died, the guy who comes to, to be the first keeper of the museum of Elias Ashmole was Robert Plot. And it's really, interesting because this guy at that time in the early, in the final 17th century, he proposed the idea of the dinosaurs. It wasn't Charles Darwin or someone else in the 19th century. It was this guy. And this is the first depiction that he made. And this is like, like a velociraptor or, that kind of class of dinosaur. And he also proposed the first crop cycles. So the same guy at that time proposed the idea of the crop cycles and the dinosaurs. And nobody teach this in school or universities. I don't believe that, the guys who study evolution knows this. I never heard it. Some, scholar talking about Robert Plot. And we know the relationship between the crop cycles and what is called that the blue bean or the fake alien invasion that Rob Skiba always show, because this is a relation. This is how deep the things go, because this is not just 100-year thing or 15-year thing. This is not start on the moon landing or, on the rocket of the German rocket technology, and from that point of the history start all this fake, the space. This is really go in our history. So for me, the dinosaur is just like, put the different green animals into the mixer and make this magic thing. Because when you really start looking to the dinosaurs, you can clearly see like a reverse engineering of the real nature. And they only painting in green, and add some kind of spikes to the column, and you have the dinosaur. And without offense, any professional in the field, but it's really, nobody really found any real skull of the dinosaur or real body, entire body. It's just, presented by Freemasonry, basically. So the first universities and our days schools are created by Jesuits. In fact, Loyola was the founder of the Jesuit order. And you can see, when, for example, you finish the studies in university, when you dress like this, it's because they are dressing you like a Jesuit. And you don't even know that. It's like you become a Jesuit. And you can clearly see in the... And that's his idea, They're all times playing games with us, and we don't have the knowledge to understand. They don't hide that kind of thing. We are the guys who don't understand what's going on behind the scenes. And that is for a reason. It's because we don't receive really true, freedom of education. And some people do. Some people really have a good education, and maybe one of the most, out there free information to get for free is the system of the trivium and quadrivium education, which comes from Greeks. So you must be looking, a little closer, because we understand that the books that we receive today, it's printed by the same God that controls the world. So you must be really do, comparison and trying to get many different sources and trying to compare and, make your own education if you want to see in that way. And something that to me really, start putting the things into place about talking about freedom and slavery, it was the word family, for example, which is a word that we used to, we use in our daily basis, we think that refers to something good, but it's family is the group of slaves. It's group of slaves, literally. If you go and look and do the same research, you're gonna find that, because it's there in the dictionary. Anytime you refer my family, it's like saying my group of slaves, because the real word is my bloodline. It's not the family. The family is the slave that worked for the Romans guys. And that is how, they play games on us. And for understand this kind of thing, you need to go to the roots of the language. And this, is a difficult thing, but you need to do it. It's, it's not easy to break this matrix. So when you start, putting all this together, you're gonna start to understand the importance of the symbols and numbers that this guy used all the time, for planning, like a false flag, or for planning events that they control and they want to give, some kind of message. They use gematria. And, the numbers in the letters, we come from the Greeks. We come from that system of education like trivium and quadrivium. They use it because it's a really nice system to communicate, And we as a normal people, we don't have that knowledge. So for us, it's just, letters and, random numbers. But that is really far away from reality. So when you study this kind of thing, you immediately going to be aware that the modern guys follow the Aleister Crowley schematria. You know, I mean, the guys in these elite powers that even in the space, we know that Jack Parson, Werner von Braun, you know, that kind of guys, they are followers of Aleister Crowley teaching. So I hope you understand where I'm going with this. But the important thing is when you see a symbol or when you see a number, that is also, that is energy, is frequency. Because the voice that when you pronounce letters or words, it's a vibration that I can really heal you with words, or I can really make heart in you just with simple words. It doesn't matter if it's a physical contact. It's always in energy. So, for example, when we follow the teaching of Nikola Tesla and we repeat things like, if you want to find the secret of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration, we used to just think in terms, to understand the space or the matter here of the energy just in the lab. But they use it that, the elite power use in those fields, but they also use in these other fields, which is in the communication, in the social communication. So the idea behind all this introduction is, trying to illustrate a little bit or mix a little bit the energy manifestations in terms of, real science, the observable science, but also in terms of perceptions energy, sublime energies that affect us all the time. In fact, the most important energy that affects us is our own thought and our own feeling. That is why I mentioned the shamanic medicine at the beginning. So, I just for reference, I create this simple word with what I'm trying to do is mix this concept of the schematria and the matrix, the thing behind the elite code, if you want to see in that way. So I'm going to play a little clip about 3 minutes, 2 minutes and a half, that is going to explain a little bit this intro better than me because it's in English. So after this, we continue. But this is a really, short video to illustrate what my point is.
The universe and all matter contained in it is made up of energy. The elite have knowledge which we don't possess regarding physical phenomena such as the significance of ley lines and numerology. Some ancient civilizations also knew things which we do not, such as the knowledge of stargates and the use of certain shapes or performing certain acts or rituals to gain access to a higher state of awareness. This knowledge has been passed down from these ancient civilizations, and the elite have kept it hidden to themselves. The elite enjoy certain knowledge that the spiritual realm not only exists and at all times interpenetrates our world, they also know how to manipulate elements of these spiritual dimensions to make things occur at a given place and time according to their wishes. On the more mundane level, they know how, through the manipulation of words, sounds, and symbols, to change people and the flow of events of the world in which we all move. If magic can be defined as the art and science of causing change in our world to occur in conformity with will, then the forces who know with a certainty that the spiritual realm exists as a part of our ordinary sensory reality have also learned how to bend, shape, and manipulate that reality and the people within it to effect change which will benefit them and create realities in their favor. They do this magic through elaborate rituals, predictive programming, and subliminal manipulation through films, media, and music. For millennia, they have known the power of the unconscious and superconscious mind. They use them against you because you allow it. Subliminal sound and graphics have a massive impact on your day-to-day life, whether you notice it or not. As we sleepwalk through our daily lives, We rarely question what may be happening in the world of manifestation, the spiritual world, where what is to become real begins to form and take shape before it actually appears in our physical reality. This is magic, and they conduct this magic in plain view. Those with wisdom of such things know that nothing happens by accident, nothing happens by chance, and that there is a design and purpose to everything, whether or not our intellect can perceive it, and that all things are interconnected in both space and time, both from the past through the present to the future. It's not simply the ignorance of the spiritual realm, it's the fact that our feeble, rational mind cannot bear to admit that it does not have all the answers or all the knowledge of all things. Until the time comes when we are able to let go of our arrogance and rational ego and learn to become spiritual warriors for truth, we will continue to have control over our minds. Until we admit that the spiritual world is an eternal part of our normal, waking reality, we will continue to be blinded to the powers and abilities the elite wield against the sleeping masses.
So, like you can read here, the world, things and symbols rule the world, not words, no law. So, and no money, if you want to see like that. It's the important thing is that is why they print symbols in money, for example. So when you become aware of this kind of, elite code, you're gonna start to see the things different. For example, when you start to compare, ancient concepts with modern concepts, you're gonna start to see, for example, in the past, the same religious people that rule the world today, they worship Baal. But at that time, Baal has these depictions, like a bull, Baal, with horns. And this kind of image that we perceive as, bad image because has horns. It's not a really bad image. The horns refers, for example, to the Fibonacci code, things like that. But they trying to we get away of that information based on fear. So they create this kind of, bad image to produce fear in us. So we reject that kind of knowledge. So the modern concept of worship Baal is just a ball, and they put it to worship their God again and again and again, just with different, artistic concepts. So, in fact, they're talking about that in the Earth, the Earth, because it's a sphere, it has a radio, and when if you know Spanish or Italian radio, if you just divide Ra, Dio, it's like said the God Ra, which is the sun in the middle. That is why they trying to make us believe that there is like a sun inside the sphere. In fact, for the people that believe that the hollow earth, they believe they have the God Ra in the middle, illuminating, from the inner core. So it's all the time they use the same kind of concept. And that is why they, do this kind of ritual all the time. It doesn't matter what time in history you look at. For our modern world, we have this kind of ridiculous, ceremonies where they go and touch the ball and they, make this kind of ritual. And, people out there looking this and they believe that this is just simply, protocols and ceremonies without any importance. But when you go to the past, you're going to see the same kind of behavior in the religious institution, because they need to use this concept to rule the world and to, putting us into a symbolic jail. That is why, for example, they draw a sphere with latitude lines and longitude lines. It's like being inside the jail, simply as that. So when you, at least in the Occidental part of the world, when you go to the who is behind, immediately is going to jump two institutions. And one is the Catholic institution, the religious institution that rules the Occidental part of the world, and also the Jewish people, or the Jewish, masters, not the regular Jewish people. And they have both. They have really, similarities that at least can make you doubt about, if they are really or not behind the scene. But they have, if you want to understand the education that we receive today, read the Zion Protocols and the Secret Monitor, which is the equivalent of the Zion Protocols, but for the Jesuit. And that, we all hear about the Zion Protocol, but I don't know how much people hear about the Secret Monitor. I don't know if anyone of you know that or read that book, and it's terrible. It's a strong reading. So you can see all the time where the actual religion is, is a Egyptian Babylon religion. I think you can really find that very easy. They have, their own. They share the same concepts, the same ideas, the same agenda behind what is going on in our world today. And when you start transfer all this information to the science, for example, you're going to see that all the important scientists or characters in the histories, they share the same kind of institution or education, because they all are or Jesuits or Freemasonry, which is like a branch of the Jesuit order. So that is why all the time you see these symbols of the square and compass, the hand, inside the jacket. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. In fact, in our day, we have in the $1 bill. So even they have their own Bible. When they in the Masonic Bible, and this is my personal opinion. I don't want to offend anybody, but for me, the Bible has so many, keys to understand what is really going on in that kind of book. Even all the religious books, there are, really secret books, if you want to see like that. So you must have a lot of knowledge to understand what's really is for interpretation or for being literal, that kind of thing. But the religious Catholic Church, they take all the concept from the Egyptians. So when they create the characters like Jesus or the apostles or things like that, they are depicted the sun worship. Is if you start, for me, express this in English is a little difficult, but if you do that research, you're gonna find that that kind of comparison. So, for example, for the Masonic guys, they go directly to the original meaning. They don't, hide behind names or characters. So they, for their initiations, they go directly and say, okay, when I talk about this character, I'm talking about Isis or about the sun or about the moon or about this or about that. So this is the kind of thing that for me is important to everyone, open mind at the same, like you maybe open the mind to understand the flat earth, because everything is related. And we have a phone call here. Maybe some guy of, So, for example, even in the Kabbalah, which is something that many Jewish people believe that maybe is of their own culture, it's also in the Egyptian culture. It's also in this kind of Babylonian ideas and concept. And of course, in the modern science, you can start have this kind of, secret meaning. For example, when I was young and I see Albert Einstein, with the tongue out, doing that gesture, I don't understand what he's doing, because at that time, who is going to do that? In the early 20th century, who is going to go with that kind of expression? He's, it's a cool scientist. I never understand that, but he comes from Jewish people and education, and when start see that what he did for who work, you immediately gonna see that kind of relationship. In fact, for example, Stephen Hawking's, Hawking, the Hawk King. And when you go to, for example, the religion thing, who has a Hawk King? The Egyptians, which represent Horus, the sun god. And in the modern Catholic Church, the hawk was replaced by a dove. But it's the same concept, it's the same thing. So, this kind of name, there is a lot of iconic name. I hope I can show you a few more so you can make your connection. But the first thing that I be aware with the modern science is that nobody can really prove that the Earth is, traveling around the sun. Nobody, even in our times, we have that kind of problem. And, or better say, the proof of the experiments are that the Earth is still, that doesn't move, and the sun and the sun, the moon, the stars revolving above us. So all these experiments show that that is the case. The Earth is at rest. So, for example, even when it's a little funny because when you go to the Foucault pendulum, even they don't admit that it's trickery. For example, you can see it from the university.
Today, it's about Foucault's pendulum, which you'll see in local science museums. I'm going to set fire to this. There's still some vibration there, but I would leave it to go, and then suddenly it goes, and then you get it going in a plane. The amplitude of this oscillation changes with time. It decreases because of the friction of the air. Either you set it running for a certain length of time and see that it will rotate for a certain angle, and then have a big fanfare and start it again and burn it with another bit of match, or you put a little motor in the top and give it a little jiggle and put energy in at the top, which is somehow cheating because you're actually pushing the damn thing, and you have to make sure you push it in a way which is not going to cause a torque. So that's the way it's done in a lot of museums.
There's an electromagnet gently pushing this, overcoming the laws of gravity and wind resistance. Otherwise, the pendulum would slow down and stop spinning.
So there's some kind of magnet making that thing move?
In the ceiling, there's a T-wing up there. The magnet is helping overcome the force of gravity, keeping this pendulum in motion. Otherwise, it would slow down and stop like the smaller one.
So the important thing behind this simply, experiment is that how they are, tricking us. I mean, they don't have, they don't care. I mean, they do this kind of behavior in every aspect of the science. They just, if they need to lie us, it's no problem for them. They make all this kind of, all the time, tiny things to trying to convince you something that they think is true, but this is the way they play the game, So even nobody talks about, for example, the alias problem with the pendulum Foucault pendulum, which is only in the days that we have an eclipse of the sun, the pendulum stop and doesn't rotate anymore, just make a straight line back and forward. And that kind of things in the terms of science is telling us that there is some kind of field interacting with this kind of energy, movement, magnitude, waves, you can call whatever you want, but there is something there. And I'm gonna play this little clip. We know, of course, there is an ether out there, but
there was a belief that there was an invisible web of energy that connects everything in the 1800s. And scientists were in a very heated debate, very controversial, as to whether or not this field exists. There was a very famous experiment that was conducted to determine if the field, called the ether field, actually existed. The very famous Michelson-Morley experiment. In my opinion, it was a good experiment. However, it was poorly interpreted. For over 100 years, Our science has been based in a belief that is incorrect. It's incorrect. Now, this is very interesting. 100 years later, 1986, the United States Air Force replicated the Michelson-Morley experiment. They published the results in the very prestigious journal, Nature, the scientific journal, Nature. They repeated the experiment with good equipment, much better equipment. The bottom line is that the field exists. They found that the field is actually there. This is reported in August 1986, the journal Nature, volume 322. They said, the field is there. Now, why don't we know about this? This should have made the cover of every major magazine and newspaper. This should have been on CNN headline news or Sky News. But this changes everything for the scientists, because the textbooks all say the field is not there. Entire careers are based on the field not being there.
So the thing is, for example, when you look into the Michelson-Morley experiment, who have the hand behind, inside the jacket, and we all know that kind of symbol. This is Michelson. So in fact, Morley, he never was, really convinced of the FEIC experiment. That is why we have Michelson-Morley, and then we have the Michelson-Gale, and then we have the, all that kind of experiment. But they also, use the scientists that they can control, because they financial this kind of science. In fact, we have news at that time of the Einstein time that, the relativity theory is more than J.P. Morgan than the Albert Einstein. And the same thing happened, for example, with Galileo, who gave the money to Galileo to build the telescope was the church. And that is why all the time we can see this kind of relationship. Even in our modern days, we have this kind of character like Georges Lamaitre, who was the guy behind the Big Bang theory and the Hubble law. So the things are still the same. The financial, institution is the same institution as the beginning of time, if you want to see it in that way. So I'm going to jump a little forward in my presentation. Sorry, guys, but I don't have much time, and I want to try to look a few things. For example, in our modern science, they all admit that there is based on things like Kabbalah, for example.
I'm a theoretical physicist, and I like to say that I walk in the footsteps of giants like Albert Einstein and Niels Bohr. I'm not a philosopher. However, I am rather dazzled by the fact that many of the basic mysteries that we find in string theory and the theory of everything seem to be mirrored in the Zohar and in the Kabbalah.
As a scholar, the most amazing thing of all is the degree to which modern astrophysics sounds like a Kabbalistic text.
When I first made the correlations between Kabbalah and science, I was stunned.
We do know that Isaac Newton had access to certain mystical texts, certain texts of the Kabbalah.
Well, the Kabbalistic description of creation is coming from a single little point, from a speck, and of having matter form and time and space form all together at the very beginning. This sounds very much to me like the description of the Big Bang.
I couldn't believe that the Kabbalists could derive these truths without really knowing any mathematics or physics.
All the things that could destroy string theory, all the things that do destroy every rival theory to string theory, they are all eliminated in precisely 10 and 26 dimensions. These dimensions are magic.
These dimensions are magic.
We physicists don't know where these dimensions come from.
The Zohar says those things. It could have been a lucky guess. I don't know.
It's rather amazing. This uncanny reflection of some of the most advanced cosmology that are mirrored in the Zohar and ancient Kabbalistic texts.
So they are alchemists. That is like the same thing in antiquity, but this is modern alchemists. They are not, the real scientists that we believe that these guys are. And these guys are, teaching to other people the same kind of concept, and that is why, when they trying to this dimensional magic, it's like say, show me an atom or show me a quark or a graviton. That magic. There is no any particle. Show me a particle of the magnetic field. Show me a particle of time, because you tell me that you can bend time and curve time. How can you curve something that doesn't have any geometry? So it's just magic for them. And for example, when you go to understand these kind of fields that they're trying to hide and mix up with gravitational waves and that kind of things, it's all it's in the ether. And when you go, for example, to the universe and Dr. Einstein, you can start looking into the thing. For example, a magnetic field and an electrical field are physical realities. Of course, we all know that. So a gravitational field is as much of a physical reality as an electromagnetic field. So they took that kind of concept that you can prove every day, and always you're going to get the same result, and trying to convince you that the gravitational field is like electrical field or magnetic field. But they never show. Nobody can show that kind of thing. So, for example, when we're trying to understand what produced the movement of the sun and the moon, and we all know that the sun has this path called analemma in the sky, like it's a figure, 8-number figure. If you're trying to, go away the system and look our system from outside, for me, the analemma, and that is why I believe that the sun circles us, and the Gleason map is a good map. Maybe we need to work on it, but I believe in that kind of model. The figure 8 is associated with the infinity symbol, and it has a reason that, because when we look to the horizon, we see we are under the spell, if you want to see in that way, of the perspective. So this figure 8, that the moon and sun, only those has that shape. They are sisters and brother, son and daughter of the Mother Earth. You can clearly see the 8th path in the sky, but in fact, we are seeing, like collapse in the layers of the atmosphere and the perspective and that kind of thing. But if you can go outside and look it from the top, you're gonna see this kind of infinity circuit, because this shape is, for example, when I translate to a 3D software and I show you this, you're gonna believe that this is like a figure 8. But when I start to rotate the camera, you're gonna see it's a circle. And that figure 8, all it's about is that the sun and the moon has different altitude in his path, and that produced the seasons and all the things that we know that this celestial body produce in our world. So here you can see the shape, this kind of shape that all the time you see that magnet, going up and down and up and down of that circuit. And you can explain even eclipses, because you share the same path, you share the same shape of the path that the moon and the sun have, and that are the only celestial body that eclipses. So we're still looking for a real proof of gravitational orbiting, because with electricity and magnetism, you can prove that. You can make object orbiting around an electrical field, but we never saw that in the lab based on gravitational fields. So that is maybe why they're trying to compare this reality and try to, say, look, a gravitational field is like an electrical field. So when you go in terms of, the theory of gravity, you can believe whatever you want, but you must believe that someone figured out the radius of the Earth, the density of the Earth. Someone figured out the weight. Who's going to measure the weight of the Earth? Nobody can do that. But they only have one, reality, which is the acceleration of the gravity. They call like that, of course, but that is the real number. So they make like a reverse engineering through the centuries, trying to get all the other parameters involved to create the theory of gravity. So what I'm trying to say is that anytime, we know how deep you can go to the Earth in our modern times. So if you want to believe that the Eratosthenes at that time figured out the radius of the Earth and things like that, you can believe that. But the only important thing about that is that they need to create the gravitational constant. That is why they need that. And because they put this number about the diameter of the Earth in some time in history, in 17th century, they can create, they know how to get out the volume of a sphere. So, they put some average between all the components that we have in the Earth, and they come to the volume of the Earth, and they take out that the density based on that kind of things. And because they have the real number that they're trying to match, which is the 9.8 meter per square second. So when you continue, what is the barycenter of the Earth, for example? But they need to use perfect sphere, because otherwise it's really difficult to get out this result and do this kind of calculation with, irregular bodies, or, how are you going to measure the supposedly gravitational pulling of the moon, of the Mercury, if you don't even have how much weight, what is the barycenter of that thing? So they always go center to center of the sphere, because it's the only way they can achieve that kind of numbers. Of course, there is all assumption. In fact, I can tell you that I'm going to skip a little bit, but the real thing is, it's like the real formula for the gravity is, is something like, let me go a little bit. It's like this, the real equation for gravity. It's Newton equal to Cavendish, Boger plus Maskelyne plus Newton over Eratosthenes. This is the radius of the Earth. But it's that, because I need to skip a few slides, but here you have Eratosthenes, here you have Boger and Maskelyne and Cavendish, and then you have Newton. So they need all those centuries to try and figure out how to match that 9.8 meters squared per second. I had all the calculation, and I can keep talking, but I have a really short time, and I'm not going to finish my presentation one more time. So sorry, guys. But for example, in terms of the distance to the sun, this is the guy who proposed the distance of the sun. It's another Jesuit called Maximilian Hell. And, this is all the time they trying to match, the things to match reality, and the numbers that they need to plot the heliocentric model. This is the Maximilian Hell. Here you can read of the publication of his result was delayed, and some, especially, accused Hell posthumously of falsifying his result again, and this is official history. And this guy presented distance to the sun. So if the distance of the sun is incorrect, the astronomical unit is incorrect. So all the measurements of the space are incorrect. That is the importance of that measurement, of that distance. So is there so much to show you? I'm starting to put in a little sad. But, based on, for example, let me just, 4 more minutes, I promise I tell it up, but, talking about the sun, for example, we, in the electrical universe, I believe it has more, nice model to present us than the heliocentric model. And let's hear Don Scott talking about that.
Good afternoon. My name is Don Scott. The electric sun is a sort of a natural outgrowth of the electrical universe hypothesis. We know that their magnetic fields actually had a circuit that showed the electric sun. What I'd like to do today is to show some of the problems of the so-called standard model. That word model should be plural, models, because for everything that we see in the sun, there seems to be a new model, or at least another patch on the previous existing model. Problems that I feel, at least, are fatal, absolutely fatal for the models that are so-called accepted these days. And I would like to then demonstrate how precisely those problems are no problem at all for the electrical sun model. The big problem, the famous problem, is the missing neutrinos. The idea of this heat transport from the core to the surface. There are some oscillations in the sun's size and brightness. And of course, oscillations in the solar wind, as somebody pointed out the other day. If there's a fusion reaction going on in the core, then how can does this reaction, does it have periodicities? That's never been discussed by nuclear physicists. There is actually a temperature minimum in the chromosphere. Where in the world does that come from? If the heat is all generated at the core, the temperature should get lower and lower and lower the further away you get from this thing. All of a sudden you find there's a minimum and then the temperature increases. Totally inexplicable in light of the present standard so-called model or models. The sun actually oscillates in brightness from a few minutes to near an hour. So the thing is pulsating very rapidly. There's no way in this world, in this solar system, that could happen. And the third one is, to me, astounding if you haven't heard about it. That is, there's an expansion and contraction of the sun in the size of the sun. The thing actually bulges and fluctuates in size like a balloon. And the extent of that bulging is 10 kilometers.
So for example, 10 kilometers extension. So what is the size for the standard model of the sun? You're gonna detect 10 kilometers? But this guy is talking more seriously. And when you remember, for example, the FEIC presentation about the model of the sun in the computer model, you can really see how this thing breathes and, generate dynamics, vortices, magnetism that move the water currents and, give us life in every way or shape or form. So.
And that happens in about a period of about 160 minutes. Where did that come from? And how do you explain it from the so-called standard model? They just ignore it.
So, these kind of things we must start to get into consideration, because we believe, in life, we used to think, because they proposed that we need to think, to be to one point to the other is a straight line, but in nature, it's never a straight line. Nature use spirals, vortices. That is the way that the nature really behave. And when you start looking, in things like electricity and that kind of thing, we have the model just simply on that. I mean, you don't need gravity models, because with electricity and magnetism, you can produce, attraction, repulsion, buoyancy, levitation. It doesn't matter the material. It doesn't matter if it's plastic or wood or water or iron or metals. It's all the same. You have it there, in our own face. In fact, when you plug a magnet directly to water, you're going to have this repulsion. So the sun, when circuit around the Earth, produce a lot of dynamics to our plane. We don't need. In fact, I don't have the time to show us, but to show you that the Mach, the scientific Mach, the guy behind the speed of the sound, he talks about if you have a firmament moving and we have a field like the ether, that produce all the dynamics that we need to explain our, life model of the Earth and all the, weather, currents. Look, for example, this here. You get close a magnet, you're gonna move the water. In fact, it's not just that. I don't know if I have in this video. I didn't, but there is a guy very famous on the internet that put a magnet near to a mice and also push it. So the orientation that the supposedly gravity produces is just an electrical orientation. It's like talking about electric gravity. And that is why the thing's falling down or goes up. You don't need the gravity force to explain that orientation. And well, I have a few things more to cover. You know, here you can see the comparison between electrical fields and the sun corona, you know, ejection. For me, it's more electrical than fire. You can clearly see in this kind of comparison. We have the moon formation, you know, even our, you know, with this, I close in the presentation, but for example, even a surface feature in our own plane of existence is formed by electricity. You know, if you go to the Thunderbolt project, you can clearly see that in really profound detail how you can form, you know, surface detail in our plane of existence. You can clearly see how you can create dunes, mountains, you know, valleys, craters on the moon. There is a lot of craters. There is one or two models of the crater that we see on the moon that the normal science can explain, because it's not formed by an impact. You can have rivers based on electricity. I mean, the path of the river flow. Every little aspect that we see in our, you know, real life model, you can replicate based on electricity. And remember the Greek concept of Zeus. Zeus created the world with a thunder. So maybe our plane of existence was created, you know, by electricity. At least you can replicate these models. And with the standard model, you cannot replicate. And I'm going to finish with this simple video. Please allow me to share this, because you're going to see here a replication of our sun, of our, you know, energy models. And all the time, they need to clarify that there is no base in gravity models. It's based on ether models.
We are so excited to be here today. So the first time I met Paul, this was many years ago, I walked in and he said, Karen, I created this sun in a jar. I got this star in a jar. I'm like, you're kidding me. He's like, oh yeah, all that stuff you've learned, put it all in the back of your brain because I'm going to show you something awesome. But this is just to show off. This is to show off Paul and some of the really neat ways that elements work and that chemistry works. And so
what this really is a oversimplification of what Dragon really is. It's combining a yin and yang energy frequency together, and they both attract. They want what each other has. There's value in that exchange. So contrary to what they teach in science, the universe is actually magnetic and light. It's not gravitational driven. So what this is I'm going to induce an electrical and magnetic field. This outer ball is the male or yang field, and this silver one inside is the yin or female field.
The tabernacle
so just like
of the sun,
males
for
and females
example,
like to do, they are going to go at it. So with no further ado, I'm going to now put this over in order to help. So instead of a sun actually being a fusion generator eating its own hydrogen and helium, and over time, you know, it's going to use all of its fuel. The sun is actually being powered by something else. There's something else.
It's powered by something else. What is going on with the sun? And we're going to see that in a few seconds.
It's acting on that female field, if you will, that's creating that sun.
There's no fusion in the sun. They don't know how the sun works.
Eric Dollar.
What's it transform? Transforms from some other dimension. It's not burning anything. It doesn't have to. It's a converter. I don't know. Nobody knows. but that's what it does. That's the only thing it can do, because that's how everything works.
So the sun is not visible.
Not in free space. It's only invisible when gross matter becomes involved, like the Earth's atmosphere and envelope and the surface of the moon or whatever. That makes the light. So that means there's no time delay. So the whole time delay thing is meaningless. It doesn't take light years. There are no light years because there's no light. So that means that the light you see from the distant stars isn't 4 million years old. It could be only minutes old. It could be instantaneous. All the theories collapse when you can't see the stars in outer space.
And that is what's happened. You know, any time that we, you know, hear about, no, because that star or that star is so far away, or that star, you know, rise up a balloon and show me the star above 30 kilometers and make that comparisons. Because all the time we see the star from the ground, and the only thing that the star could be inside or in the firmament is because it's projected in the layers of the atmosphere. It's in those layers of the firmament, I mean. But when you go outside those layers, there is no more stars. So you cannot assume nothing measure in terms of measurement. And they call light years because it's the Luciferian years. You know, all the time they use this kind of concept. So that is why Lucifer rules the space. And they don't need to prove nothing about that. In fact, look at this picture. This guy that talked in the beginning of the video, what he have in the background of his lab? Egyptian knowledge. Because the Egyptian, I don't believe that there are bad guys, you know. It's just the Jesuits took their knowledge and they use for their own purpose, and they don't share with us because they don't want to, we have access to free energy and, more important, to the spiritual, you know, teachings. Because after all, we're going to go to the same box, you know, after this game. It doesn't matter if you are Jesuit or Jews or, you know, Muslim, whatever. We need to learn how to move in that plane, because that is where we come from and where we're going. And these guys are kept, you know, that in secret. So when you start to put all the pieces together, and believe me, I can keep talking a little more, but I don't have much time and I don't want to respect the other speaker's time. But for me, I really recommend that take a time to understand the electrical universe and the gematria and the symbolism, because it's all tied together, and you're gonna maybe get the knowledge to go back to the source and, you know, prepare to transcend spiritually and with the consciousness. So thank you for listening, and thank you guys. Thank you. Thank you.